Hey, welcome to Loud and Brave. I am Charlie, and today I am coming to you with some thoughts about, in the last few weeks, two of my boyhood musical heroes have left us. And in addition to that, I shared a couple weeks ago, a person very close to me personally also passed away. And then almost right after that, another member of our family passed on, and just been watching the way that people process losing their loved ones, and personally in my own family, and then watching sort of as the world has reacted to, and the two musicians I was talking about specifically are Brian Wilson, the great genius of the Beach Boys, who gave us, decades of incredible music. He revolutionized the recording process and really was instrumental in giving us what we call now multi-track recording. There would be no Beach Boys, or arguably there would be no Sgt. Pepper's Beatles album even without Brian Wilson, because he famously was the inspiration for Paul to sort of pursue that. Anyway, so Brian Wilson was one of them, and then just last week we lost Ozzy Osbourne, and Ozzy is someone that in the fifth grade I was exposed to my very first Ozzy Osbourne song. It was "Bark at the Moon," and in my cousin's bedroom, I watched, or I listened to that on vinyl over and over and over and over again, and I was instantly hooked. Became a lifelong Ozzy Osbourne fan. I've talked about it before, but just watching the world react to those two leaving us, and all that they've left with us in their wake. And Ozzy created also decades of great music, first with Black Sabbath, and then as his solo career. And I never stopped being an Ozzy fan. I still, to this day, I love his music, listen to it a lot. And, my thoughts and prayers have been with both the Wilson family and the Osbourne family as they navigate this, because while those two people are idols and heroes and, giants to so many people like me who just love their music and love what they did for musicians and artists, to their families, they were just husband and dad and brother and uncle, and all the things that our family is to us. And so I've just sort of been watching. It's been kind of a weird experience to be going through some of that in my own family personally, and then watching the world sort of go through that together for these iconic artists that are no longer with us, and how people process grief and how they process loss, and even more generally than that, how we process things that are hard and suck in life. And I think for me and for a lot of people, music is one of the ways that we do that. I know for me, whether you're talking about someone passing on or even like breaking up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, it's music is the thing that often gets people through or helps get people through those situations. I remember just as a teenager cranking up, the Outfield, No Surrender, like when I had a breakup that I was having a hard time dealing with, or that Cinderella power ballad, Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone. I'm dating myself a little bit, I know, but that's the music I grew up on and listening to. And even years ago when my grandmother passed away, I remember driving around. I lived in Nashville at the time, but I'd come to Illinois for the funeral and everything. And it was raining after the service. And I remember driving around in my car, because I'd driven up here from Nashville, and just on repeat playing the Oasis song, Stop Crying Your Heart Out. And it sort of dawned on me today that often when we don't have the ability to process how we're feeling, to get the words to come, how songs do that for us so often. And I think that's one of the reasons why people connect with songs often on such a visceral level. And, a particular song will take on great significance or meaning in their life because they are sort of imprinted in a certain moment, in a certain season when that song or even a record, there's whole records that are like that for me. The Urban Hymns album by The Verve is an album that is very imprinted on a certain specific time in my life. But how when we hear those songs, they take us back and somehow we feel very connected to those songs or that record or even the artist. And we start to sort of identify with the artist and think, man, they really get me. They really speak for me. And of course, I'm a person of faith. And so, no, I know that not everyone is, but for me, there's the other element for me that when I'm going through something hard, sometimes, it has been my faith. Now, I say sometimes because sometimes, and this may come as a shock to some people, but sometimes even being a person of faith, I've struggled with, and it wasn't really, I can't look back and say, oh, it was my faith that really pulled me through. Now, there are definitely times when it was my faith in God, my walk with Jesus Christ, that made all the difference. And I've even thought, I wonder how people who don't have that get through something like this. But I will tell you that there have been other times in my life where it wasn't that, where it was music or friends or something else, something other than that. And so I was thinking about how, for me, as a person of faith, there have been times when in hard times, whether it's a time of loss or whatever, I've always been the kind of person where I don't have a hard time yelling at God, I guess is for lack of a better way to say it. I express myself openly, and that may seem irreverent to some people, but that's just how I am. It's how I've always sort of interacted in my personal faith experience. And I think maybe there's a little bit of a parallel there for people when music does that, because, you think about you're driving around your car, you're sitting in your bedroom and you crank up the music and you're singing along at the top of your lungs during this terrible experience. And those words are speaking for you. And so maybe that sort of answers the question I've had, like, how do people who aren't people of faith get through hard times? Maybe sometimes it's that. Maybe it is music, or maybe it's something else. But I know for me, it has always been a combination of the fact that I'm a person of faith and I have what I consider to be a personal relationship with God and music. And sometimes it's been both, and sometimes it's been one or the other, but it's always, I think, always been one of those two things or two of those two things. And so, as I'm looking at the way the world is dealing with Ozzy leaving us and Brian Wilson leaving us, it just seems to come back to the music. They did this concert for Ozzy. They did there's been all kinds of talk about continuing Ozfest every year as just sort of a memorial to him and to all that he represented. And so, which I think would be an amazing idea. And there's a new artist, Youngblood. He's not really a new artist, but he's definitely sort of in the United States. He's huge in the UK, but over here in the States, he's just starting to conquer the States. And I kind of feel like Ozzy sort of passed the torch on to this guy, and he's great voice. I love his new record. If you haven't listened to it, you should check it out. It's called Icon, or it's called Idols, not Icon, Idols. And so those are just my thoughts about, I'd be interested to hear, if you've had that same experience where music speaks for you when you can't speak for yourself, when you can't come up with the words, if there's songs or artists or albums that have done that for you. I bet there are for many of you. And, it's one of the ways that we're loud. It's one of the ways that we find courage, I think, is through music. And so I'm very thankful for that. So thankful for Ozzy and Brian Wilson. And, we're going to miss them, but we've got their music. Thank God. So have a great day. Be brave.